It's being loaded. Here we come. Actually, I've used this before. Okay, let's see here. So back in, it's now 17 years ago, since Don Banta and I put together in 2008 this book called the Mono Lake Basin. It's one of the Images of America books. There are thousands and thousands of these books across the country nowadays. They are just a really neat idea that someone came up with to fill a book full of historic images with detailed captions to go with them. And if you know the kind of book, you see that they all have this kind of colored sepia tone, and all different topics. Around here, there's Bodie, and there's ones for the Eastern Sierra. One of the interesting things that I picked up on is that they all have exactly the same number of pages. Now they have some specialty books in this series, but so you find the right number of images to fill those pages, and then tell the stories that go with it. And that's what Don Banta and I did. And let's see if this will advance. It's not advancing. Am I pushing the wrong one? It's not advancing, Rich. What do I have to do? I'm glaring at you, and then. Okay, it's not happening. Can we make it with the computer? But okay. So this is Don Banta and I back when we first brought this book out. Don is gone. I really miss him. He is the key part of this book because he was a collector of historic images of the Mono Basin, and he provided an awful lot of the photos. Others did. The Mono Lake Committee did. The Forest Service did. The State Reserve, State Park System did. We're having technical difficulties. Okay, now if I push this button, you think it's not working, Rich. Can we just do it with the computer? Okay, so the book opens with, there's 10 chapters. This is number 1, Forming the Watershed. So the book opens with some geology and some basics about the Mono Lake Basin. And again, we're looking for pictures that people maybe haven't seen before. And I love this one. This was a Fraser's photo postcard he took up on the top of the summit of Paoa Island in the old days. And these two crater islands, or crater lakes, crater ponds, had water in them when Mono Lake was full. And just by lowering the lake, the water table changed, and they don't today, and they haven't for all the years since the lake went down. But anyway, this isn't going to work. Oh, there it is. It worked. So yeah, another. Thank you. One of the pictures from that part of the book is just this Israel Russell, Lake Russell water, Ice Age lake boundary, and how Mono Lake fits within that. Let's see. Okay, are you advancing it or am I? Okay, I'm going to just tell Rich to advance. Yeah, we'll do it that way. And then there's this one. The fellow who's sitting perched up on the rock here is Don Banta when he was in his, I think, his maybe 20s. Young Don Banta. I don't know if that can't be his son over there, can it? That would be Bill. Anyway, this is in the book. They went out to Nedget Island and found, and I don't know if you can use there's an arrow in the bottom part of this pointing to this right here, which was an inverted T shape that was put there by geologist Israel Russell's crew in 1883. And they went out and relocated it, and it marked where the Mono Lake was at that time in 1883 at 64.11 feet above sea level. And so, can we move forward? Thank you. So the next part of the book, and the way it's 10 chapters, I'm not going to be able to tell full stories tonight. I'm going to give you an overview of. There's 200 pictures in the book, and I'm going to give you, like 75 of those tonight. So, and talk a little bit about it, give you a taste of what's in the book. So there's a section on the natural history. There's stuff about the birds. Go ahead and click through. Phalaropes. Go ahead. This is an incredible shot. We had something close to that this year with the eared grebes. Go ahead and show the next. Yeah, that's an eared grebe up close. And next is about the gulls. So we've got the big three species of birds that have the most numbers that come through Mono Lake: the migratory phalaropes, the eared grebes in the fall, and the California gulls who nest out on the islands, feed their chicks there. They come from the coast. They've gone, most of them, or they're all the way over on the California coast again by now. And then there's the whole story about the strange water in Mono Lake and how it's produced these strange formations, the tufa towers, that have been exposed as the lake dropped. Go ahead. And so then on to part three, racing along here, which is about the first people at the native people of the Mono Lake Basin, the Kutsadika. By the way, it's not spelled this way in the book. If you look at a copy of the book, it's changed. The name, the spelling that we were using has changed. Just be advised. The picture, you just go back. The picture here has Nellie Charlie, Mono Lake Paiute, Kutsadika, gathering fly pupa along the shore of Mono Lake, and that's the Kutsavi in their language, from which they get their name, because it was one of the staples of their diet. And the other picture here, this is not a regular source of food. It comes cyclically out of the pine forests of the area, but it's these big caterpillars that called piagi. They're the caterpillar of Pandora moth, and they have their life cycle. They go down as a caterpillar that has been chewing up in the pine trees, and then comes down and pupates in the ground in the pine forest, and then turns into a moth, which goes out and mates and lays eggs, and it's over again. Big source of food when they were available, which is like on a cycle of about a 5-year cycle that it happens. So go ahead. The people here, the women here, world-renowned basket makers. Nellie Charlie, or Tina Charlie, is one of them. I was just looking at something online just yesterday on Facebook. Somebody posted a picture from the Indian Museum in Yosemite Valley, and an incredible basket that is Lucy Parker made. But Tina Charlie's baskets, some of them have sold for tens of thousands of dollars. They're just highly prized, incredible works of art. Go ahead, please. Here's Nellie Charlie, a relative, and Carrie Bethel with burden baskets. Now, one of the things about our museum is that we don't have a gigantic collection to represent the basketry of the local people, but we do have a treasured collection, and including burden baskets and various of the fancier, smaller baskets, and very much something that we do treasure, and that's part of the story we tell in the museum. Go ahead. House. There's two different kinds of houses that the Kutsadika used. More structurally big in the winter in the east side of the basin to deal with the winter weather and snow, and more temporary brush houses that they would build when they moved over to the west. Did I say east? East side to get away from the snow. West side, once the snow went away, and they would come over and take advantage of all of the things opening up in the mountains for hunters and gatherers. And this is a picture that's in the book of Kutsadika men playing hand games at Farrington Ranch. Farrington Ranch was one of the early homestead ranches in the basin, south of the town of Levining, and that's what was going on here. Gambling games that they played. Go ahead. So then there's the next section about when things started to really change. The search for gold happened a number of different places, but this photo is from Bodie at its peak, which would have been about 1880 or 1881. And before all the series of fires took out a lot of what's there. But one of the things I like about this photo is, and seeing what it looked like then, is all the buildings have been whitewashed, have been painted white on their exteriors. And you can get a hint of that today if you go to Bodie and look at these weathered buildings and look up under the eaves where the weather hasn't taken away all the paint even today after all this time. Go ahead. So anyway, the Mono Basin became the source of material to support the mining town's operation. And a lot of that had to be done with wood. And the wood was harvested in the pine forests here. A lot of it eventually came out of the Mono Mills site. There's some really big trees here, but they needed to be milled to be utilized. They were used in building the buildings of Bodie, but also down in the mines and for structural mine supports, and also to run the steam to burn firewood to run the steam that powered the mills. So go ahead to the next one. So people had the job of getting that wood to Bodie. And at first it was done in this kind of way, or even with mules loaded up with wood gathered out of the juniper pine forest and the Jeffrey pine forest. Go ahead. Until the Bodie to Benton Railroad was put in, going around from Mono Mills around the east side of the Mono Lake in the Mono Basin and up the hill and up into Bodie. And it got completed in time for Bodie had already kind of gone past its prime, really, in terms of gold production by the time the railroad came. But Bodie would linger on, and the railroad would continue to run for a number of years. So that you could still go drive around the east side of the lake and see some evidence of not only the Mono Mills where that all happened, but the evidence of the built up berm where the rails used to be. Some of the ties, the wooden ties, are still there. The steel was all taken out by World War I, basically, to take advantage of the steel and recycle it. Go ahead. Lundy, we just did our Ghosts of the Sagebrush tour in August and focused on the history of Lundy. And this picture was, as you know, when Lundy was, Lundy boomed at the same time that Bodie boomed, basically. So Lundy, again, was in decline by 1900, but still was a happening thing there. That's the lake, Lundy Lake. Not as big as the reservoir today, and those buildings, of course, are not standing today, but go ahead. Up the mine the biggest mine that was why there was a Lundy community, a mining community, was the May Lundy, way up the side canyon, up thousands of feet up above where the town actually is. And this is a photo of the Jackson and Lakeview Mill that handled the ore brought down from even higher up in the canyon out of the mine. And then, of course, things all then had to be moved even farther downhill to get that processed and out of Lundy Canyon. Go ahead. Other mines, I wish the Cassidys were here tonight. The log cabin mine had that name in its later manifestation. A fellow named Jack Hammond, who is the one who established Hammond Station, I'll show you a picture in a minute. He established the first mine here, the first claim. Simpson Mine for years had that name, and then it changed ownership. And when Frank Cassidy, one of our honored elders of the Mono Basin Historical Society, when he was a kid, his father was the caretaker and manager of the log cabin mine in the late 30s and into World War II. And Frank was going to school down here at the high school. Frank's the one who put together a book about this topic, about the log cabin mine. Every one of these things that we're talking about, there's been programs done here for us over the years. There's been books written like about Lundy and the log cabin mine and all these other things. But going briefly, racing along here, go ahead. 1908, out on Paoa Island, the big white island, there was an attempt to find oil, and it wasn't successful, but they set up this rig and they drilled down, and one of the interesting things they did is they kept a log of what they were drilling through, and they went down through and encountered the Bishop Tuff material from the Long Valley eruption. That's that pinkish tuff rock that's in the area on the surface, but this was buried down under Mono Lake, and then below that, they found further evidence that there still were lake sediments in here. So we know that Mono Lake, because of this, as part of the evidence, is more than 3/4 of, or almost 3/4 of a million years old. Is that's what I'm trying to say. So it's an old lake, and anyway, that did not end up producing any oil production. Go ahead. This picture is cool. So the national forest locally was established as the Mono National Forest in 1908. And this photo was taken in 1923, is how we had the date on it. There's one of those old cars. And the detailed sign, it's harder to read depending on how big you're seeing it here, is that there's information at the Levining Ranger Station here on camping and fishing. There's recreation maps that are obtainable. Way back when there wasn't a ton of Levining yet, but there was there was recreation going on in the national forest. Go ahead. So chapter 5 deals with some of the earliest farms and ranches. Most of these developed because of Bodie and the need to serve all of those miners and the town folk up in the mining town with food and alfalfa production for livestock. The Sylvester Ranch, this picture is taken in 1922. Alice and Albert. This, if you know the area nowadays and more recently, you may know where the Simus Ranch was, which has now become the Shambo Foundation's property since Jan Simus passed away. But anyway, that's the location. It's in the northwestern corner. Go ahead to the next slide of the basin. So this is for fields in the Sylvester Ranch with the hills right behind. And where the trees are is where there's water coming down from DeChambeau Creek from down the hill, and the source of water. All of these ranches that were most successful is because they had some of the west side of the basin's water. Go ahead. There's their cabin. The cabin's a cabin is still standing there, and actually the Conservation Corps, no, the Historic Corps has been hired by the DeChambeau Foundation this year. They were working, I think they're going to continue next year, on restoration of this old cabin. There are 2 children in this down at the bottom. You see a girl and a boy sitting there, the Sylvester kids. Go ahead to the next one. We'll see them again. That's William and Margie with their father Albert on this big piece of equipment. And that's their mother, Alice, and her flivver. I love that name. I actually looked it up just to make sure I knew what it meant, and it's a common name for the Model Ts and the Model As, those cars of that era that were being mass produced at a low price, so almost everybody could get a car back in the late 20s. Go ahead. And here's Margie Sylvester on this wonderfully cooperative cow. Named Nellie, according to the caption written on the back, and with our neighbor Mary. I don't know who Mary's last name was in terms of a neighbor, but go ahead. So the Ney Ranch is another one, and one of the people who's come and talked to this group over the years a lot is Bill Ney, the descendant of the Ney family. The Ney Ranch is just north of the town of Levining at the bottom of the hill, or actually on the slope of the hill, heading down towards what many call the old marina today. And they had to get their water mostly from Levining Creek, brought on a diversion ditch around the hill and over in order to grow crops, but also to run their dairy. They had dairy cattle. So go ahead to the next picture. This is the family that has a very pretty famous incident where the Ney had the Winslow Ney had this boat. And it doesn't look like it would hold up real well in one of the Mono Lake windstorms, and it did not. And unfortunately, there was this 5 folks, including Winslow, drowned. Um, 5 others, and Winslow drowned on a day in 1898. If you go to the pavilion in Hess Park and look at the historic panels that have been put together, the Ney family wanted to really find a way to honor. There never really was a way to in town to honor what their relatives, what happened here, and the ranch in general. And they have one of the nice big historic history panels on the pavilion here in Hess Park nowadays. Go ahead. This is the Ney herd later, so it's not Winslow at this point, but and the location actually, they were renting or leasing grazing land for their dairy herd. So this is over towards Farrington Ranch. If you look at the background there, that's the canyon going up to Mono Pass. So go ahead. I love the guy's hat and his style. He just looks like a cool Western dude, doesn't he? Go ahead. So this is Thompson Ranch, and a lot of people know this place today as the site of the Mono Lake County Park. If you go north of town 5 miles, turn right onto Cemetery Road, and there's this county park. Thompson Ranch became the property of the city of LA eventually, as the history played out. But this is an alfalfa field back when they were growing crops. And the line of trees is, of course, there, and the source of water in this case is the lower part of DeChambeau Creek, the Simus is in the the uphill portion that what was still coming down. So if you go to the park today, this would be, I guess, on the west side of the creek in that park, and this is all manicured lawn today. Go ahead, next one. There's a number of Matley places around the basin in the homestead era. And the Jake Matley Ranch is actually south of town. It would be, if you were trying to go figure out where this is, if you go across Rush Creek heading south and are looking off towards those hills in the background, the Mono Craters, and it was right there. Some enormous hay piles in this picture behind those structures. They really produced a lot of alfalfa with water from Rush Creek, basically. Go ahead. And another, really productive, based on other photos that are in the book and that we have, was A. Lewis Camasco had this ranch or farm on the southwestern shore of Mono Lake. Today, this is what's called the Dondero Ranch. This picture is 1928, and they're holding, I think it's cabbage, giant heads of cabbage. Yeah, go ahead. And another interesting, intriguing one, out on Paoa Island. In the 1920s, the McPherson family established a homestead out there on the island. There is water there available. And where we are, if you're looking back, Lee Vining, not yet in existence as a town, would be back basically past that smokestack and out at the base of the hills. So we're looking back across the western part of the lake at the Sierra Nevada. Go ahead to the next one. So this is, they for a few years, they produced some amazing crops. This is corn up over their heads, looks like Kansas instead of the Mono Basin. This is Lenita McPherson and her son, Wally, Wallace McPherson Sr. would become. Go ahead. And we'll get back to the McPhersons and what they did after they left the island in a moment. But on another ranch, DeChambeau Ranch is north of Mono Lake. And in 1924, Violet DeChambeau here is holding some, lambs. Go ahead. And about 1937, some years later at the ranch, Kent, Norman, and Phyllis DeChambeau here. Norman, that's Norm DeChambeau. Many of our Historical Society folks remember fondly Norm DeChambeau, who became the curator of our museum and filled that role for many years. There he is. There's a lamb that's busy nursing from that bottle right as they took this picture. Go ahead. So chapter 6 moves on to the story of Mono Lake's resorts and finally the town of Levining that we're going to make a big thing about in terms of its 100-year history here in a bit. This picture goes way back to the 1910s, early cars crossing a real interesting looking bridge over Rush Creek. So this is just south of town, headed north. And behind there would be where King Ranch is today, the headquarters in this basin of the DWP and now the Environmental Education Center run by the Mono Lake Committee. Go ahead. So another Matley here. John Matley had the ranch that is where today the Mono Inn sits, and for a time, because there was just the ranches, all of the things of a community had to happen kind of in those places. This is where the first post office, the first Mono Lake post office was for a time. Nobody was holding still when they took this picture, so everybody looks strange. But yeah, go ahead to the next one. So a little farther south from there is a place where Andrew Thompson and Arch McNabb had set up a place to collect tolls from people, narrow road running along the west side of Mono Lake. Mono Lake's full to the brim, of course. This is well before the diversions had started. And in order to get through that narrows, these guys had set up a toll. You had to pay a toll to travel along the west side of the lake. And then in time, they sold out to the Hammonds, and this became, go ahead to the next one, Hammond Station. And nope, that went backwards. Go the other way. One more, there we go. And so here's in 1905, Hammond Station now is starting to become a place for travelers in cars to stop. In fact, the next manifestation after Hammond sold out was to Cunninghams. Go ahead to, and the Cunninghams renamed this location, and their resort that they developed there is the Tioga Lodge. And Ruby Cunningham was the primary mover and shaker for everything that happened at the Tioga Lodge in those days. If you can't, this, by the way, this is another Fraser photo postcard image. And if you're having trouble trying to picture how the Tioga Lodge being, basically all the buildings on the west side of the highway, and how to picture that in what you're seeing here, think of the highway being beyond this big white building, and that big white building is not in existence. And one of the things that happened, there was a serious flood that came down Post Office Creek, it was called, right there where Tioga Lodge is. By the way, Hammonds became and the Tioga Lodge became the place that was the center of activity in the basin, and the post office moved there from the Matley site before it finally found its home in the Levining. Go ahead. So what was starting to happen? The thing that defines so much of what the town of Levining is a place for travelers, a place for them to go different directions, to stop and get gassed up, to stop and stay for a night in a hotel, to go to the restaurants, all those things. On the left, we've got the bike loop going up the Tioga Pass Road up towards the entrance to Yosemite National Park. A gathering in 1926 at the Tioga Gate. Not yet looking like it does today, a pile of rocks to mark the gate, but not that we're up there today. There's more of an established look of a gateway and a house, a gateway house right to the side. But go to the next one. So in the 1920s, before the town of Levining got established, the area that would become Levining was Poverty Flats, because you really had trouble making a living there. But there was this meat market, Curry's Meat Market, and then the store and restaurant run by Ed Bergen, who eventually turned it over to his son-in-law, and there's that family name again, Matley, Glenn Matley, and 1925. This within a year, Chris Matley, go ahead to the next one. Chris Matley would buy up the acreage that would become the first subdivision with the name Lakeview at first. And because a post office was going to be in this town, shifting from these other locations, the Postal Service has let the Chris Matley know that the name he'd chosen in his paperwork for this subdivision wasn't going to work. Lakeview already existed elsewhere. And so the town became named for Leroy Vining, a miner who had come over here in the 1850s, had established a sawmill in the canyon that today is Lee Vining Canyon. And, he died a few years later in 1858, I think it was. But so he never knew there would be a town named for him. And at first, for whatever reason, the town was spelled as one word, Lee Vining. And it was spelled that way for a long time until the 1950s. And then the post office eventually formally changed it to a two-word name. So every time we tell people on the phone what our address is, we have to spell that out for them because people, today I was talking to somebody in Reno who didn't know where Lee Vining was and how to spell it. So anyway, okay, so go to the next one. And one of the very first things that was that Chris Matley partnered with Gus Hess, then the Hess brothers, because they knew that this was the place where all the cars were coming to go to Yosemite, to travel north between the towns and cities north and south of us. And so the Hess Garage was established right away at the beginning of the town of Lee Vining. And that's Gus on the right, who became the father of Augie Hess, who passed away a few years ago, one of the amazing people who helped establish this historical society. Go ahead. So here's a photo taken a year later in 1927. If you're in the room and you turn around and look at that wall, you can see a great big print of it, but the people at home can't see that on Zoom. There's some really neat things here, and I'm going to point, and I'm sorry if we can't, maybe the mouse can show you some of these things. So the early stores and town buildings were over here on the right, and down here there's an interesting structure that is one of those buildings. I think these are Lakeview Lodge's cabins. This one, very distinctive, with a long row of hotel rooms with a cross entryway here, is, I'll show you a picture of it. It was built within a year. That's the Mono Hotel. The road, the highway, is dirt at this point, and it's running in front there and running out more to the right than the highway does today, more towards where Matley Avenue goes today and where we are. There were berries in the western part of the town, and look at the canyon. The canyon trees are there. By 1941, things were going to change. I'll show you a later picture still of the town where this riparian corridor along Lee Vining Creek is looking very good. And if you look out into the lake, what do you see? What don't you see? Paget Island up here. Paoa would be over here. There is no land bridge, is there? The water is right up against Black Point to the north. So go ahead to the next one. So this is the Mono Hotel right after it was built. Peter Gilly, the guy who built it, is on the left side there, and two of his children, Rosemary and Peter, are in the picture. And in the lobby of this El Mono Hotel, there was at that time a restaurant, a dentist was at work. I don't know that story. I just know this. I just have that information we have on the picture, and a barber shop. And the El Mono is still a going concern today, of course. It's one of the hotels in Lee Vining with, a great sign out front that was added in neon eventually. So anyway, look for Mono Lake way down here on the right. You can just see it was closer, and the road running out that way, curving off to the right as it passed through to the town. Go ahead. So by 1926, slow down. Where are we going? Okay, one more, just one click. There you go. By 1926, we've got the town established. Bob Curry sold this market. If you look way back up in the right here, it says Levining Market. It's just not a good picture. And he eventually sold it to William Banta in 1933. So this picture was a year before that in the winter, obviously. Go one more, there's a better picture coming up. This is William Banta, Bill Banta Sr., who, before he bought and established that business himself in town, had been delivering produce grown down in Bishop in the Owens Valley, and by delivery truck. Of course, by now in the 30s, trucks are are functioning. They're not like those little bitty cranky things of the late 20s. And he would bring up to the town to was the provider, and then of course he bought, and go to the next picture. He bought the Lakeview Camp, which in a minute ago I showed you some cabins stuck to behind the main part of town, and the Lakeview Lodge is where this all was going. Today we have the Lakeview Lodge, one of the biggest hotels in town, and it's still owned by the Banta family, the descendants of William Banta Sr. Levining Market down the way. Go ahead. Look how the cars are changed. They're getting more aerodynamic. They're getting more, more comfortable looking. They could go really fast at that time. Look at all the old gangster movies from the Prohibition years, and all those cars racing around. So anyway, go ahead. So this is down on the left, John and Harry Blaver on the right. Blaver would purchase the market from the Bantas, but the Bantas kept the camp and what would become the motel operation as their thing all the way through to today. And the Blavers became a major force in the town in terms of a commercial force in Levining for decades. Go ahead. And so moving on down the street, you're going to the north on that one side of the street, the west side from the highway, another big winter scene here. Julio's Sierra Cafe. If you're trying to figure that one out, think Nicely's restaurant. The exact position has changed. The Nicely's would come in eventually and turn in that same area. The building doesn't look the same. In fact, I was hearing from I was going to say Edna Nicely. No, Nancy Pinizzato, the current owner of the Nicely's restaurant, recently, that because of the way the highway expanded, all the buildings now are really in a slightly different orientation. But anyway, Julio's there. Building that was moved by the Calhouns, another real key name in the business years of early Levining. And go to the next one. And over to the right of that is the Levining Club. And in the 30s, this was owned by the Hesses, and it was a dance hall. It was used as a theater during those years when the DWP came in to start building the aqueduct diversions and the tunnel under the Mono craters, and when the highway was being worked on and improved going up to Yosemite, and when the CC of the Depression era had camps around here, everybody would come in the evenings on the weekends, and this is the place where the parties and the drinking and the dancing happened. And the Hesses had a band. So this is the Mono Lake Committee building. It's still in that same location, and the basic structure of it, the look of that false front with the curve on top is still there. That's where they are today. Go ahead. One of the things that happened in the early years was that the importance of the opening date of the Tioga Pass was a real key that just has always been the door opening to the busy season of the summer. And when it closes, it hasn't closed yet this year, everything gets a lot quieter around Levining because our collection, that transportation over into Yosemite. So to celebrate the opening in the spring or whenever it would fall each year, there, in the old days, there was a community fish fry. And one of the suggestions for the centennial celebration is that we should reenact that. I'm not sure where we get these fish and exactly how we do it. I think that's Vanita McPherson there holding the fish. And we don't have the names for all the people that are in that picture. But yeah, every year, community fish fry. Go ahead. And so here's that similar kind of scene that, as what we saw back in 1927. This is 1941. That was the year that the streams began to be diverted. Was only just beginning. And so we still have healthy looking, lush riparian tree corridor going down along the the canyon for Levining Creek into the lake. But here's a couple of interesting things. There's no buildings now over here. Some of the buildings of the town are out of sight behind mature trees that have come up in town. We'll see some of this in a bit. The highway turns and goes out, not that way, this way. This is where Matley Avenue runs today and Hess Park is today, and we're up here at the community center today, and then goes north that direction. The route that they eventually moved it, straightened it out, that was running through there was a dairy farm right there at the north end of the town at this time in 1940. So a lot of big changes. Go ahead. So some scenes from what things were looking like down in town. There was this Texaco gas station that was associated with the Calhouns, there's that name again, modern cabins. And down away to the left, I can see a Flying Horse here. What's that gas station? Yeah, well, there's another name. What's the other name for the Flying Horse gas stations? Is that Mobile? Okay, it's Mobile. The town had at one time, I think Augie has said that it had 6 or 7 gas stations. I'm not sure. We got pictures of all of them. Across the street, there's some interesting things. There was this court, the Honia's Court. These are places you could pull your car into, little carport openings, and stay there. And just to the left of that is a small structure. There's a guy walking right there. And Don Banta said that used to be the jail during the 1930s. It was a county jail. And after the 30s into the 40s, the war years, World War II years, the county jail all went to Bridgeport, and they stopped maintaining a jail in town. And that's when Don was able to use it as a recreation hall or the recreation room for the Boy Scout troop. And he was the leader of the Boy Scout troop by then. So again, look at the cars, different. Now we're in the 40s. I don't know if there's anything else. Go ahead to the next one. So this is looking the other way towards the more southern end of town, and a little bit later on, this is 1955. We've got, if you can, it's hard to read, but we've got a Richfield gas station right here. Down here where all these cars are parked, that's the Hess Garage, another gas station. In between is a sporting goods store. What we've got the sporting goods store that's about in that location today, the Beavers. And the interesting story that Don was very involved with in negotiating with the Forest Service, because the original Chris Matley subdivision was more the center of where the town is, and the southern end developed with all these businesses on Forest Service leased land. And businesses, of course, wanted to regularize that and not have to be leasing their land from the Forest Service. And so they had this big negotiation that got settled in 1967, and there was a land swap that occurred as part of it. And today those businesses hold the title to their land. So go ahead. So outside of the town itself, the things that were happening, the Mono Inn was established by the McPhersons north of the town of Levining, before there was a town, 5 miles north, after they gave up out on Paoa Island. And Benita McPherson became the big mover and shaker for a number of years in the Mono Basin. Gas station there too, you see. And it says on the sign on the left, the place that made Mark Twain famous. Now, Mark Twain visited in the 1860s, and they took that and ran with it. Go to the next slide. So by the late 1920s, they had established an annual event called Mark Twain Days, and costumed folks being Tom Sawyer and Huck Finn and all of that. There's a story told in the book and in some of the other histories here about this bust of Mark Twain and how Veneta had hired a sculptor to create the bust. It was used this day to take these pictures, and then she wouldn't pay for it. He wanted more money than they'd agreed to or whatever, and it's never been there ever since. I don't know where it went. It would be really interesting to find that bust, find out where it went. Go ahead. So part of Mark Twain Days over the years were different things. This was the first year. They had a beauty contest, and when you look at some of the labels on the women, they're from different places up and down the Eastern Sierra. Lily LeBrock, that's Lily Matthew, who's our still with us today. She's a centenarian herself, and we need to make her the queen of our celebration next summer if she's still with us. But Lily was age 5, and she is, you see the 2 children there. I'm not sure who the other one was, but she won a silver dollar in this competition. So go ahead. The McPhersons operated a boat tour. Wally McPherson, that boy that grew up from that picture we saw with the corn on Paoa Island, ran boat tours from the Mono Inn for quite a few years, different boats. The second one was larger than the one in this picture and was named for his mother. It was named the Veneta, and it was damaged by wind eventually. Once the tours were no longer happening, it was sitting up on the shore of Mono Lake near the Mono Inn, and wind picked it up and kind of broke it apart. But it was still there until this year. And I remember we talked about as a society whether we could do something about preserving it. We never did actually take any action there, but it burned in the inn fire that happened earlier this year. And now there's an outline on the ashes on the ground, but basically we lost that bit of history. But anyway, this picture was another Fraser photo from the postcard series. Go ahead. And in order to promote, they had these posters, and we got a one in the museum that talked about how Paoa Island, which they still had some title to, the McPherson family, was the Tahiti of the Sierras. They had wanted to have a resort developed out there where the hot springs are in the island. None of that came to be, but this was all part. The rest of the poster talks about how you could get on the boat tours. Go ahead. And one of the things they added towards the end of the run before World War II was a number of years of speedboat races. They would invite speedboat operators up from Southern California. And, it was an interesting thing to do on an extremely salty alkaline lake. But anyway, we have some of those things on display in the museum too, the trophies and the motors from the motorboats. From the speedboat era. Go ahead. So there's a section on the schools, and so we're dropping back in time again. The first school in the basin to serve the ranch families, children, 1896 at the Mono Lake School. There had been one in Lundy Canyon during its peak years, a small school, but this one is a bit north of where the Mono Inn is today, over towards where the county park is today. And in fact, I added a picture that's not in the book. You'll see it's in color. Go ahead to the next one. Janet took this picture after the fire that happened, and what it did is it cleared out brush, and this flattened area with the rock rocks around the edges is where we think the old school was before it got moved. Now, after a few years, in order to get it closer to the highway, go ahead to the next one. A new building was constructed, a school building, 1926, and it was used for, what is that, 18 years or so. And then it became a private residence. Eventually, the city of Los Angeles came in and bought this location, and they were threatening to take the building down or burn it down. And back in 1987, there became a campaign locally to save that building by moving it. And it was moved to Hess Park, and today it is, and ever since then, has been the Mono Basin History Museum. The Historical Society manages in Levining. So that's the building, and the kids who were in it that year in 1942. They're all named in the book. I wasn't going to try to include that in the program. Go ahead. So right before World War II, for just a few years, an elementary school up through grades up through eighth grade had been running for a long time. They started doing high school in Levining, and these were students in the 1942 high school. And then what happened is World War II came and they stopped operating the school in town. And, students like Lily Matthew had to go down to Bishop to do their high school years. And so it wasn't until after the war that the local high school was built. So go ahead. And we'll get back to that one because I'm going to show you some of the school skiing activities here in a minute. There's a chapter dealing with the June Lake Loop, and I've just got a few of those pictures here. Carson's Camp goes way back. It was a resort on Silver Lake as far back as 1917. The rest of what we think of as June Lake Loop was pretty much not much at all. Go ahead to the next picture. That there was some development that came in the 1930s when the Department of Water and Power came to do the construction years, and more restaurants and more camping along the lakes. This picture was taken in 1949 at Rodeo Grounds, which still has that name, at least for locals. This is just not too far from June Mountain, where June Mountain is today. Cars parked around the edges, no fence, but the cowboys of the area coming in and doing rodeo events. Go ahead. So there's a whole lot more in the June Lake chapter, but chapter 8 goes to winter challenges and winter recreation. And you can see they hadn't quite figured out what to do with snow on the highway as they plowed it to keep the things open. Today, those piles get pushed to the middle of a 4-lane highway through town. Go ahead to the next one. Winter of 29 was one. They decided they were going to build the biggest snowball of all time. Two of the names you see here are Hess, Stan and Larry Hess. That's the very important local family. Go ahead. So by 1953, post World War II, Don Banta was a young man and became the coach of the downhill ski team for Levining High School, which would go to compete up at Tahoe. They didn't have a lot of other places to go, but they'd go north and do competitions. And what this picture on the left is, you can still go out, look up the hill behind the town of Levining and pick out where these towers are. Some of them still sticking up out of the ground, but this was the rope towers that would take skiers up the hill, and these guys had won this trophy that year. Got that Hess name again. We got the Blavers. We got Frank Cassidy. I mentioned him in relation to the log cabin mine. He's this tall guy. Oh gosh, right there. Yeah. And he was on the team. I wish he was here with us tonight. So yeah, go ahead to the next one. Couple other things about resort stuff and all, and recreation. Out at the mouth of Rush Creek, Walt Dombrowski developed by shifting some water out of the creek, some ponds. So freshwater ponds right there. Today it would be right just on the lake side of the road that runs along there. And they drew in waterfowl in those for hunting. This other picture was taken up where today there's the Tioga Pass Resort, but Al Gardisky had what was called at that time the Tioga Camp, and he was a trapper. And so these are all various furs that he had trapped back in the 20s we're looking at here. Go ahead. And then there's a chapter about a source for water and power. And this is the kind of storyline that I barely touched, we just barely touched on in the book in terms of facilities. But you got to get Bob Marks's book next year when it comes out, and you'll get the whole story. But anyway, we have water here, and it can be used to generate electricity, and that turned into business opportunities. This is Jordan, up on the northwest side of the Mono Basin. By 1910, they had completed a hydroelectric plant to bring water from Lundy. They had expanded the Lundy Lake into a Lundy Reservoir with a dam. And it wasn't going to last very long. Go ahead to the next. March of the next, the end of the next winter, avalanche came down and wiped out the Jordan plant and the buildings and homes there, killed 7 people. Rescuers eventually found one woman alive, Agnes Mason, plus her dog, buried, rescued them. Big rescue event with people in Bodie seeing that the power had gone out, and the local ranchers in the basin responding. If you know about our museum and the displays about skis, you might pick out knob-headed skis here, the famous DeChambeau skis that had that distinctive shape on the ends of them, very long skis. And that was, can we go back? Yep, there we go. All right. So anyway, one of those things that happened. Go ahead to the next slide. So up in Levinine Canyon, in the 20s, the Southern Sierra Power Company was developing water coming down Levinine Creek and the watershed from up above. And the picture, it sort of needs an explanation over here. This picture way over on the left of the screen with this really long, line running down. That's pipeline dropping from way up where Ellery Lake is on the Tioga Pass Road, dropping down to the building that you see close up on this other picture. This is the pool plant, the generating plant. Just a few years ago, our Ghost of the Sagebrush tour was allowed by Southern California Edison, that owns this and operates this now, to go in and peer through the doors of the pool plant while it was operating and hear the turbines turning and the power of that incredible drop. So the last chapter in the book is about saving Mono Lake and the things that went into that. This picture was in the 1930s. From the 35 to 40, basically, West Portal was the main construction camp for that construction project to drill a tunnel under the Mono craters and take water from the streams that fed Mono Lake down and dump it into the Owens River system and the LA Aqueduct to Los Angeles. There were actually 3 other construction camps along that line where the tunnel was being drilled. This was the biggest, and it actually would end up doing something kind of interesting for the local communities. It would provide buildings that would be moved, picked up and moved into town and into the towns to be used in there. It also, during the years it ran, it was the local hospital because of the need for having a hospital to take care of injured workers. It also became the place where if you were injured in the Mono Basin, you would be brought by ambulance to the hospital in the camp. Go ahead. So here's basically how it looked. This is a covered rail system underneath that line that's going into where the tunnel is extending and eventually would go 11 miles under the Mono craters. What you're looking back towards is June Lake, June Mountain area off to the left, and off to the right would be, you know, towards Lee Vining, looking back towards the Sierra. Go ahead. So, because of course, what happened with the diversions they began in 1941 when the tunnel was completed, and by the late 1960s and into the 70s, the lake had dropped so much it had lost half its volume, doubled in salinity. The Mono Lake Committee formed in 1978. This is one of those, you know, the island where most of the gulls were nesting. There's a big pile of dead chicks there. That happened because coyotes got out. The lake dropped so low that Nedge Island was connected to shore. The rest of the scene is an annual event which started happening to publicize, you know, the saving of Mono Lake. Bicyclists would take water from Los Angeles back up to the Mono Basin on their bikes, and on a given day, bucket walkers would take water out of Lee Vining Creek up high above the diversion and walk down the hill, and everybody would gather at the lake and put the water back in the lake and you know, say we got to save Mono Lake. So go ahead. There's the committee building. And things that happened and related to that, by 1981, the Mono Lake Tufa State Reserve was established. That's Janet doing a demonstration of how to make tufa during a tour at Mono Lake. Click it again and click it one more time. Okay, the National Forest Scenic Area was established 3 years later, and the visitor center that came along with that in 1992. So it took 8 years to accomplish that. But all of these things basically helping to spread the knowledge and awareness of what was going on at Mono Lake. And go ahead next. During those same years that followed, this is an interesting one because the fire that just happened recently burned a boardwalk down across where the Mono Lake County Park is. What you're seeing in this picture is from 1988, the first manifestation of what became a much fancier boardwalk. And it was done with volunteers, and it was from the State Reserve, and it ran across that wet marsh all the way down to the shore of the lake, just only 4 foot wide with planks. And then the dedication of the David Gaines Memorial Boardwalk on the old marina site was happening the same year, 1988. This other boardwalk is where the old marina is just north of town. And there's, again, a marshy area to get to cross to go to the shore. And in this picture is Sally Gaines with her 2 children, Sage and Vireo. They're cutting the ribbon. There I am on the left, just peeking into the picture. And that's actually some heads of some of the kids of our kids. Go ahead. And also during those years where before we knew what was going to happen with Mono, a number of things needed to happen with the new state reserve. And the Navy had come in to the lake in the 50s and into the 60s and did test explosions in Mono Lake. And then the lake had dropped a lot from decades that followed. And so all across the shore, on the south shore of Mono Lake, which is now called Navy Beach, locals called it ever since then, there was all this detonating wire. And there was other things that were part of, what had been left in the bottom of the lake by the military. And after we got volunteers to come and gather up as much of it as we could, it was a project with the State Reserve. There's Janet up on the right, looking really young. After that, the military came back and they brought great big cranes from China Lake, the Naval Weapons Center or Naval Air Station down south, to bring out, get rid of some of the heavier big cement blocks and things that were part of all of that. So, and one of the things that happened, go ahead. And before we got to a decision about what was going to happen with Mono Lake, there was a state water board hearing here in the basin at the new visitor center. Most of those hearings all happened far away in Sacramento. Kerry Kellogg's on the left. He's still with us. I hope he will be part of our celebration next summer. Elma Blaver, there's that Blaver name again. Oh, Betty Shannon, then Elma Blaver, and Augie Hess, who I mentioned earlier, who's again not with us anymore. And the state attorney couldn't be there to do the questioning that day, so there I am over there. I got to do the state questions, pose those questions that day. Anyway, go ahead. So the good news, of course, by 1994, the State Water Board decided to amend the water licenses of the city of LA to protect the lakes where the public trust values that needed to be protected. We aren't where the lake is supposed to be yet after all these more than 30 years since then. But some very good news came down the line just the other day. You may have read in the LA Times about the city of LA is possibly going to have so much water recycling that in a new facility they are completing that they may credit it to Mono, and at least some folks down there are saying who are involved with this decision. And finally, resolve the things that happened that they did to Mono Lake. So go ahead to the next one. So there's Don again, the key person who basically saved. He's one of those historian type people who just because he cared saved so much of our local history and made it available for this book. And I'm really glad we were able to do that. And I have, go to one more slide. I think I have, no, okay, back it up, leave that up. I'm going to turn the lights up. I brought some copies of this book. Some of you, I would hope, have it. I'm going to go over here and turn the lights on. Some of the lights. I don't know. It's not a very big crowd. How many of you do not have this book? All of you have it? Everybody's got it? I was going to give them away tonight to people who didn't have them. Okay. You got it? You got it. That didn't work. Okay. So if you need another copy, I'm just going to lay them right here. Cole, do you own a copy of this book? Yeah. That's all good news. Okay. Those of you out in Zoom land, by the way, how many did we get Zooming tonight? 20. That's great. Okay. Thank you. I wanted to do this, for a long time. It just seemed like a good time right now to do it. Join us in December, the first Monday in December. If you can, if you live locally, come to the local party. We won't be doing the Zoom that night, I don't believe, from the King's House, but we will be having a good time. So those who can come are welcome.
I'll give a formal thank you to Dave. Great as usual. Anybody have any questions? No. Great talk, Dave. And that concludes this event for this evening. Thank you.